Hi neurospices, welcome to Late Diagnosed. Excuse my voice. I've been unwell, I'm still unwell, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an intro for today's video. I'm going to do a deep dive into my background and what perhaps were the early signs that I had ADHD and autism that weren't picked up by medical professionals simply because the criteria for females is so different than it is to males, and it's only recently been discovered why. Join me as I share my own personal stories and the intricate web of factors that finally led me to being diagnosed after many years of misdiagnoses of mental health conditions. Whether you or someone you know is navigating the complexities of mental health, this video shares my own personal journey and gives you more insight into what I'm now understanding to be signs of my diagnosis earlier in life. By sharing my story, I aim to raise awareness and foster better understanding. Stay tuned to the end to find out what next week's video is going to contain. You're going to want to stay around for that.
When I look back on my life and, different things across my life that probably were indicators now that I look back. In school, I was really bright. I was very capable, very intelligent, picked up on things rather quickly, but also appeared to be quite lazy when it came to doing homework, when it came to studying, things like that. I kind of breezed through, even though I didn't really make much of an effort. Well, seemingly didn't make much of an effort. I certainly did make an effort, but I made an effort on my terms, and it wasn't the same as what other people were doing. And I had made many observations across my life about how things were done, and looking back, I can see that the reasons that I did that was because I was trying to pick up on social cues. I was trying to pick up on how things were done so that I could do them that way. I didn't realise that that's what I was doing, and I didn't know, as many people don't, that no one else was doing the exact same thing. All I knew is that I could see that other people were able to study without there seemed to be any issues with it, and were able to do a plethora of other things that I found really difficult. In hindsight, obviously that was ADHD, and I think probably out of both diagnoses, ADHD and autism, that I probably have the most struggles with ADHD, or certainly the most symptoms for me with ADHD. I can get very well organised, but I can also fall into a big hole of disorganisation. When I've got time frames that I've got to stick to, so I've never been good with housework, for example. And as a mum, and I was married back then, no longer married, but as a mum, I struggled with keeping all of that to the standard that I felt needed to be met. And I struggled internally because of that. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I felt like whatever standard there was, that I was a failure, because it didn't matter how much I tried or how many, oh my goodness, I tried all of the different things. I subscribed to different email lists where they send you out a reminder throughout the day, and more than one, which got very annoying very quickly. But they would send reminders on what needed cleaning that day, or different systems on how to keep your house done, and how to keep on top of your washing and on top of your cooking and all the other things that are required when you're running a household. And I couldn't even do that. It would work for a couple of weeks, and I'd be on top of it, and then, you know, old habits would come in, and I would once again feel like an absolute failure because I wasn't able to meet this incredibly high standard I had for myself, measuring myself against what I thought was just normal, but wasn't normal for me, and I didn't know that at the time. So over those years, as my kids were growing up, I got through. I managed to get things done, but constantly feeling like a failure. So my husband at the time was really fastidious and particular about how to keep a house, and my mum was really, really good at all of that, and my sister was really good at all of that. So I wasn't, and I felt like I was letting the team down, you know, like this is what's expected, but I'm not able to meet those expectations, and I felt like such a failure because I couldn't do it, and I didn't understand why I couldn't do it. It made no sense to me that I'm a highly intelligent woman with a great deal of skill, and I couldn't do something that felt like it should be really basic and really easy to do, and it just did my head in constantly. So when I finally bought the place where I'm at now, I ended up getting a cleaner, and that was fantastic. That was absolutely brilliant, really good for me. But here's the funny thing, and you'll probably be able to relate to this if you also have ADHD. So my cleaner comes around once a fortnight, and that's when I do my best cleaning, when my cleaner's coming around, knowing that my cleaner's coming around, so therefore I've got to do the pre-clean cleanup. But that was a measure that I kept myself to. So I was able to, it was a deadline, effectively. And because I had a deadline, I was able to keep to that. And I'm like that too now. Like if I invite someone around, then I'm going to do the big cleanup beforehand. I'm going to make sure that everything's pristine before they come. But if it's just me and I'm there on my own for a long period of time, then, you know, things can fall by the wayside, and the need to get it done is no longer there. So the urgency that our brains need for the dopamine isn't there, and therefore I'm not able to do that. So finally, after all these years of struggling with what I figured to be a basic thing that I should be able to do, I'm realizing that it's just that my brain doesn't work that way. I'm still learning, still very much learning what my brain can do, what fires my brain up, what engages my brain. So I have, with the autism side of things, I'm learning that the special interests that I've had my entire life with natural disasters, I know, weird, is an autistic thing. Being able to do, focus in on certain things and not lose interest in that is a ADHD thing. And I'm learning how there are so many different ways that I masked over the years in order to compensate and fit in. I remember saying for years in a variety of different settings with people who were listening to me that I very much felt like a square peg in a round hole. Now I put that down to the fact that I'm adopted, and only because that was the only thing that I could find in my world that seemed to fit that description. My siblings are also adopted, and I've always known that I was adopted. So I wasn't told later in life that I was adopted. It wasn't, like this great big secret that finally came out and my whole world was devastated. I knew my entire life that I was adopted, and I knew that I was chosen, and it was never a thing, it was just, and in fact, it was more of a, I always found it quite funny because my sister and I are very close in age, so less than a full gestation we are in age. And we were in the same year in school, and so in high school we were in some of the same classes as well, but certainly in the same year. And we used to have great fun with kids in school, because when they found out that we weren't twins and that we were, weren't, so we're a little over 7 months apart. And when people find that out, the first thing they say is, oh, well, your mum was really quick, or one of you were premature, and, you let them know, no, we're both born on time, and then they have no idea how to work out how we can still be sisters, but we're only 7 months apart. And so we used to tease people with that one, and, eventually reveal to them that we're adopted, and then everyone was curious and wanted to know a little bit more about that, and, it just became a thing. But when I look back on my life, I look back, and specifically in high school, my sister had a lot of friends, and I was kind of friends with them because they were her friends. But I didn't really have my own friends. Well, I had a couple of friends, but they, didn't stay with me after high school, whereas my sister's friends have. And along the way, I've gained some great friendships with women, and some of them I've maintained. A lot of them I've maintained, but then a lot of them I haven't as well. And I've always made friends really easily, but I've not necessarily kept them. And I'm not sure whether that's because I moved a lot. So I've moved. I'm 55, and I've been living where I am coming on 7 years, and that's the longest I've lived anywhere as an adult. I pretty much moved every year since I was 20, or thereabouts, probably younger. I got married when I was 19, yeah, so that's about right. And I think I added up, I've moved 46 times. And, given I've been where I am for 7 years, that was for age 48. So I've moved a lot. I've maintained still some of the friendships, even though I've moved a lot. But, and I don't know, maybe that's part of the reason why the friendships kind of haven't been as strong as what my sisters have, although she doesn't still live in the same town, but still has the same friendships. I don't know whether to put that down to the autistic side of things and feeling, like I don't fit. Perhaps other people have not really understood me. I certainly haven't felt understood a lot of my life. I was off work for a period of time. The diagnosis was complex PTSD and depression, and it was most definitely those things, but it was also undiagnosed autism and ADHD. And I think the complex PTSD, whilst I believed that was attributable to a relationship that I managed to get out of that was very toxic, I think it probably was that relationship was probably the last straw after a lot of stresses that I had experienced across my life. But because that relationship was so toxic and so abusive, the strength that I had was well and truly spent, was well and truly gone, and I was no longer able to cope. But couple that with entering perimenopause, all the changes in hormones, all the changes in my life, now understanding that, you know, my autistic brain is not a fan of change, and yet I went through quite a bit of that in a very short space of time. I also lost a number of people who were close to me over a very short space of time. People passed away. And so I had a lot of grief to deal with on top of the abuse that I was suffering at the time. So it was a lot to deal with. And when you're trying to survive, any extra stress on top of what you're already experiencing is just absolutely life-changing and not in a good way. And I was absolutely burnt out. I probably would have described myself as having a nervous breakdown. And in fact, during that relationship, I do believe that I had at least two and was on the precipice of a third when I made the decision that that was it. I was out and I needed to leave. And it was only a few short months after that that I actually got out of the relationship. But even that and the process of that and ending a marriage, and yeah, it wasn't a pleasant experience by any stretch of the imagination. It was really hard. And I went through hell. I absolutely went through hell. But thankfully, my psychologist, who I'm still with now, really helped me through that. And, you know, I processed a lot of that trauma, which uncovered the deeper trauma. And then eventually, obviously, the diagnosis. And so that's where I am. After experiencing quite a bit of trauma, quite a bit of just feeling like living absolutely on the edge of a cliff, I guess. And you know, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not going to be self-diagnosing or whatever. I'm just learning more about myself. But I do think that what I am experiencing now is probably burnout, and why smaller triggers for me or smaller stresses just affect me so deeply. I've explained previously about, you know, a neurotypical person has a certain size cup, and the normal stresses of life, you know, gradually fill up that cup to the point where, you know, you get to it overflowing. My brain has a smaller cup, and the energy that I have to expel just to even exist in a neurotypical world fills up my cup very, very quickly. So what most neurotypical brains can do and take on board before it gets too much is a lot more than what I can. And I feel like I've been living life on the edge for such a long time. It's really hard to it's just hard. I'm trying to work out ways to get in some passive income so that I can work less in the normal 9 to 5, because that particular way of working doesn't suit my brain, but also just is not helping me achieve. It's not helping me to regulate. It's not helping me to feel calm or feel rested, or, you know, even my Thursdays. So I'm on my way over to babysit my grandson, and I really, really would have liked to have slept this afternoon, but I know I wouldn't have been able to anyway. And I also know that seeing him just is such a good tonic for me. So even though the actual trip here is hard, I know that seeing him and spending time with him will always make me feel better. So that's an easy decision. But it's still, my brain still fights it. My brain still tells me, all the things I'm getting wrong and all the things that I'm not good at, and even making content, trying to come up with different subjects for content. I feel, the good thing for all of that is that I've got time pressures on it, because I want to be making sure that I'm releasing new content every Saturday. And so I need to film new content, and I need to come up with new ideas and new things to share. And in doing so, it kind of keeps me to a schedule, which is great. And I need that. But today I've had the worst headache, and I've had more medical tests that I've had to do, and just so much going on. I'm in really need of a holiday, which I'm having a holiday, and I'm so looking forward to that. Really, really need it. So thank goodness for that. But in the meantime, there's a lot of work to do in order to get me ready at work to be on a week's holiday, and then more work to come back to as well. It's just constant. If someone would like to give me the winning lotto numbers, I'd really appreciate it, because I'd really like to retire. I'd really like to not have all this pressure on myself, and I think I put all this extra pressure on myself. It's not, other people aren't doing it to me, I'm doing it to myself. I've got to stop doing that. I've got to take better care of myself. Working on it.
Can you recognise yourself in some of the things that I went through? Perhaps you've been on a similar journey. Maybe you're already diagnosed, maybe you're not. Maybe someone you love is experiencing or has experienced some of the things that I did. It's worth having a look at whether or not this diagnosis is you. Because to create understanding for yourself, most importantly, is one of the greatest things that you can do for your mental health. There are so many of us with stories, the backstories that brought us to where we are today. And often those are very hard, and they're long journeys that have finally brought us to a place of understanding ourselves. And it's not something that, is a pivotal point in time where we finally figure it all out. Not at all. We are all works in progress, and we're each unique, and we're learning to live life on the spectrum. Thanks for joining me today. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and if you have already, thanks for rejoining me. I'm looking forward to next week's video, where I'm going to share my recent holiday, where I went on a cruise, but it didn't actually go to plan. So if that's something that you want to check out, not just the cruise, but what actually happens to someone neurodivergent when they travel alone. Oh yes, I travelled alone. Don't necessarily recommend that, but hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on any videos, and press the bell so that you get notified when my next video drops. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a great week. See you next week.